Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Waters Above. We have a lot of spice to talk about today, family. It's been a wild past couple weeks here in crypto land, from XRP no longer being considered a security by the government overlords, to Twitter being rebranded as X, just a couple weeks after this partial win for Ripple and the XRP community, and all the conspiracies that have surfaced surrounding that. Then we have the launch of WorldCoin, a project from Sam Altman and his team at OpenAI, which developed the dystopian product they call ChatGPT. And with the release of WorldCoin, my community was interested in my thoughts about this project, and since I received an overwhelming amount of requests, I decided to do a full decode on WorldCoin in my recent Red Pill podcast, which is available now. And since the month of August just kicked off over on Patreon, if you've been waiting to join, I appreciate your support. You can join today by visiting patreon.com/watersabove to join the Mastermind community membership and get instant access to my weekly Red Pill podcasts. That's my technical analysis podcast to wrap up the week and for me to review the altcoins that our community votes on. And by becoming a Patreon supporter, you'll also get access to our Discord server for our community group chat, and you could come hang out with the Wolfpack. You'll also have full access to my entire Livestream Archive with over 90 live streams, and you'll also unlock the biggest discounts available in my courses. The Patreon link can be found in the description box of this video and in the pinned comment below. I greatly appreciate your support. Now, this brings us to today's video. So to bring even more chaos on top of everything else that's going on in this crypto market, as of a couple days ago, the SEC comes after Richard Hart, which instantly shows up in the price action of both EHEX and PHEX into a price range that I shared publicly back in the middle of June. That all coming to fruition as we speak. So today's video is actually a surprise, because I'll be decoding Richard Hart and this whole event that went down and tying in everything you need to know. And I'll be exposing a key date that I found while I was preparing this decode that is, no lie, shocking with how many connections I made to this single day. You're going to want to watch this all the way until the end, regardless if you're invested in HEX or not, because this decoding methodology is priceless. You could even apply it to anything that interests you. So you're not going to want to miss out on this. Get a pen and paper ready to take some notes, because this is going to be packed with value. So if you're new here, we do cryptocurrency technical analysis and combine it with Gematria, Numerology, and Astrology to understand these markets. Feel free to subscribe and turn on the bell notification to stay updated when new videos come out. And make sure to give this video a like and share this channel with other conscious beings to help grow our community. And with that being said, let's take the clear pill. So before I get into this, a disclaimer. What I'm about to expose today is by no means a stab at Richard Hart or HEX or anyone involved in HEX or PulseChain communities. I am not here to pick sides, and I'm definitely not here for the drama. Over the years, I've been invited on to several interviews with channels that focus primarily on the HEX ecosystem, and I'm incredibly grateful for those opportunities. I've always been vocal about that, and it's a big part of my philosophy to integrate communities and to collaborate. That's what we're all about here. I've been transparent with my truth, and I believe the HEX community for the most part has been appreciative and supportive of my art over the years. And for those who disregard my methods and do not see the merit of any esoteric applications to this market, even from those individuals, I've received their kind words and respect for my technical analysis and the calls that I've shared publicly since pretty much my first interview with Crypto Coffee. So shout out to him and his community, and perhaps he and I could link up again soon to discuss what's going on lately. And just about a week ago, I connected with Randy Hilarski. Shout out to him and his community, and we had an incredible collaboration, not only talking about crypto and finances, but just about life in general. So I say this at the start because I want the HEX community to be aware of where I stand in regards to all of this. And the same thing goes for the XRP community, or those who only follow Bitcoin or only follow Ethereum, whatever project you focus on. I want you to be aware that I started out in this crypto space as a professional trader and an educator, but more importantly, I'm a decoder. It is my job to stay unbiased whilst I'm decoding or doing technical analysis, so that my emotions do not get in the way of my decisions I make regarding my investment thesis. Over the past couple years, I've done over 120 podcasts over on my Patreon analyzing at least 300 different altcoin charts from the bull run all the way to now in the depths of this bear market. The whole time keeping my emotions out of it so that I could have clarity while I'm analyzing these charts to provide clarity to my community. I've been doing this the whole time without subscribing to the tribalism that comes along with focusing all your energy towards one particular token, all the while exposing the tribalism that infests this crypto space along the way. It's sad to say, but someone has to say it. So I want everyone who is new here and perhaps not aware of what I'm really all about, just know, here we are calm, composed, and neutral in our analysis. We're operating from the middle path. And again, I repeat, you must realize what I'm about to share is not an attack on Richard Heart or Hex. I do not know who Richard Heart is. We have never spoke. I have only seen a couple clips from interviews my supporters have shared with me. I particularly remember one podcast that was shared with me when he spoke with some other influencers, and he made some really solid points and exposed some really critical things that need to be in the public's awareness. And he seems like a very intelligent individual, which is to be expected from someone who has his level of popularity and the way he marketed himself to achieve that. This so-called outrage marketing tactic that Crypto Coffee explained to me about a year ago, and I'm not sure if this is the case today, but it seems that this marketing style might have been what put him on the crosshair of the SEC lately. Lastly, before I get into this decode, I just wanted to let everyone know where I'm really at with all of this. If anyone is happy about the SEC lawsuit against Richard Heart and praying for the demise and the downfall of Hex or PulseChain, you really need to check in with your soul. First off, the SEC is a parasitic organization. And secondly, no matter how another man acts, whether you agree with the lifestyle and opinions or not, you have to focus on your own life and stop wishing lack on another man. Because when you wish lack on someone else, that lack comes back to you tenfold. Stay in your lane. Focus on your life and your family and your purpose. That's all that matters at the end of the day. None of us who are involved in crypto should desire the SEC's involvement at all in this sector. It's the investors who should decide if the project has value, not the government. Also, I'm not invested in Hex or anything in the Richard Heart ecosystem, so that shuts down any of those theories. I'm not motivated by any other means to discuss this project except for those who are invested in it and have been supporting my work. I'm literally doing this solely for my supporters and because I'm intrigued by the symbolism and code that surrounds this project. And after today's presentation, I think you're gonna agree that this underlying code is mind-blowing. Whether it is controlled, scripted, or purely the simulation at work, whatever you believe, this decoding system cannot be disregarded if you really want to have an edge on this market. And whether you care about Hex or not, I still urge you to continue watching this because this decoding system is applicable to any altcoin, any stock, any sports team. It's holistic in that way. So no matter where you're at with this, you'll be able to apply this code to whatever interests you. So let's get into it. All right, so we're all caught up to speed regarding this information of Richard Heart being sued by the SEC for securities fraud. And although this is a recent development, this is nothing new here in crypto. Anyone who's been following along Ripple is well aware of the fact that the case is still happening, even though they got a little win in the courts a couple weeks ago for XRP no longer being deemed a security. Ripple is still in the case with the SEC, and this event triggered back in December of 2020. So it's been several years since that has started. Case is still ongoing, and I remember that moment vividly because I was in the midst of creating my crypto Mastermind course, and it was a really interesting time, and I paid a lot of attention to the way the XRP community was communicating back then, how they felt about everything, some of their theories they had about when the case would end, and it seems to be no different in this time around with Hex. So I've been there before. I know what this is like. I know what it's like to be heavily invested in a project that's going through this same exact thing. And of course, for different reasons, but ultimately this community that you're a part of is aware. We get it. This kind of energy that's going to kick in, and everything surrounding Gary Gensler and Securities and Exchange Commission and all of the responses back to it, just letting you guys know that this is just getting started and this could take a while. Once the government gets their talons in on one of these cases, they will do everything they can to stretch it out as long as they can to milk as much profit and money out of the situation. That's just the way these parasites roll. So get strapped in, family. This is just beginning, and I'm not trying to bring any doom and gloom here. I'm just being realistic. Okay, so now that we have this out of the way, wow, what a toxic tweet this is. People on Twitter are very special beings. This is insane. I didn't do that purposefully. I literally just wanted to load up the document, but anywho, I peeked over and saw, wow. Whew, low vibe. Alrighty, so let's get to this decode, all right? We have this individual who's born Richard Schuler, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, going by this alias Richard Hart. And I actually just want to kick off with the code right away. Again, this is Gematria, numerical value of the letters of the alphabet. Basic cipher, English ordinal being ABC equals 1, 2, 3. That's an easy way of remembering it. And I particularly like to prioritize the English ordinal, full reduction, and Chaldean. I would almost consider Chaldean and English ordinal my priority, my number one, tied, and then full reduction number two. I'll use the reverse ciphers here and there, but these are the key ciphers for me. So we have Richard Hart giving you the 113. This is very interesting because I just covered WorldCoin and WorldCoin having the 113. It's pretty just interesting how that's all connected. Anyways, getting back to Richard Hart, more importantly with this 113 code, you have the Securities and Exchange Commission giving you this 113 in Chaldean. And by the way, guys, I'm going to do this like literally live for you. No edits, no cuts. This is how my strategy goes. I want you to see exactly how I do it so that you can implement it. Again, this is a public YouTube video. There's no paywall here. It's right here for you to see, for you to utilize. So right there, we're already getting a connection for Richard Hart with the SEC. So I decided to check in on Richard Hart's birthday. And you can see that right there. It's October 9th of 1979. And his birthday is actually coming up in a couple months, and he's going to be turning 44. Now, from an esoteric perspective, this is crucial. This is a power number that I associate with having to make a critical decision about which path you will go. The number 4 is a symbol of the door or window, which is a man-made portal. The 44 is almost perceived as two choices. So like I said, one will have to make a decision which path they will go, which door will you walk through. Now, I decided to take 44 days from his upcoming 44th birthday. Note, hex equals 44 in one of those reverse ciphers. But we're going to go over to October 9th of 2023, and we're going to go 44 days before his 44th birthday. And this lands us on this key date of August 26th. And remember earlier we were talking about the number 113 because Richard Hart equals 113. Well, this is also 1 month and 13 days apart. Just so happens to be perfectly coded into all of this. That's the 113. But this date being 44 days before his 44th birthday, and this is where we're going to start in today's decode. How mind-blowing this will all get will start from this moment. So I believe August 26 could be an important date for Richard and the Hex community, especially since I checked in on this date connected to Rosh Hashanah, which is the Hebrew New Year, and effectively this Hebrew New Year out of all of them in the past 50 years will be the end of the Jubilee. Okay, this is an event that only comes around once every 50 years, and we're living in it right now. And you're going to see as we go through this decode why it's so important that particular piece of information tied to Richard Hart and Hex, because you're going to see how it's all coded in. Now, what I find to be so fascinating about this August 26th date is how it ties back to September 16th by 21 days. This is the day of Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year, September 16th. Now, why is this so crucial? Because that number 21 ties you back to Saturn by the code. Now, you're well aware that Hex and Richard Hart's entire ecosystem is tied to the hexagon, which is the symbol of Saturn. Saturn's hexagon. I've went over this plenty of times in other YouTube videos as well, if you want to go check those out. So Saturn gives you the 21. This day is associated with Saturn. And not only that, both of these days land on a Saturn day, the day of Saturn, Saturday. So this is very, very important, and we're just getting started. Now, August 26th has another important piece of code because it's the day leaving 127 days in the year. This is the 31st prime number. You could perceive 31 a way that I've shared in the past, and I think you need to start applying it more if you want an edge on this decoding. Now, 31 can be spelled out as 3 ones, which becomes 111. And we're in the 111th anniversary since the sinking of the Titanic ritual. And on this year, 111 years later, there was the Ocean Gate Titan submersible ritual, which just happened recently. Remember the day of September 11th, another important day in history, 9/11, lands on the day leaving 111 days in the year. This event happening in New York, 111. This 31 code is a serious gem, and I've already proven its significance in my work throughout this entire year, and it was confirmed with that Ocean Gate incident. Now, remember, the sinking of the Titanic was to get rid of some powerful men who opposed the Federal Reserve System back in 1912. Then 1 year after the Titanic ritual, the Federal Reserve System goes live. Just like how we had this Ocean Gate event, and then FedNow goes live. It's all scripted. Speaking of the number 31, hexagon, which hex is short for, is 31 in Chaldean. 31 is the 11th prime number. It's really, really important here because SEC equals 11 in Chaldean. Again, tied back in. So this individual, Richard Schuler, was born on October 9th in 1979 on the day leaving a very important number. Could go back to his birthday really quickly. October 9. Let me actually go to the exact year or two. 83 days left in the year. Now, this number is very important this year out of all years because 83 is your 23rd prime number. Now, you might be asking, why is that significant? Well, speaking of Rosh Hashanah before, this shows you that we're utilizing the Hebrew calendar. It's very important, okay? So if we consider the Hebrew year we're in, it's the year 5783. That adds up to 23. I'm calling it the year of the Jubilee. That equals 23. This date that he was born on leaves 83 days in the year, which is more esoteric, more mathematic. You start to see the importance of this connection being the 23rd prime number. Okay, now let's connect even more dots here. We have this 83. Richard Schuler decides to take on this last name Hart, almost like an alias. Hart equals 83 by the code right there. Again, based off the day he was born, and this being the 23rd prime number, which is tied to everything I just shared. What makes this really fascinating is Hart, this name he decided to take on, has the 52 and 25. If you've been following my work this year, you know where you've been seeing that. I even came out with a full decode presentation called Year of the Rabbit Decoded. Now, rabbit equals 52 and 25. Same ciphers as the name that Richard chose to have as this name. So Chinese zodiac is another important element in this coding system. So of course this happens to him in this year. The SEC sues him in the year of the rabbit. Hart, rabbit, same code. Now, if you really want your mind blown, Richard Hart's birthday this year is the 9th of October, 2023, of course. And this has a double-digit date numerology of 62. Note how connecting it to August 26th, it's 6 weeks and 2 days apart. So we're already starting to see some connections here. Now, this double-digit date numerology is a little bit more complicated, even though the calculator does it for you, but it's very solid for my decoding system. I love to use it, and I've been using it since I started my decoding journey. Now, whenever we look at a number, we always want to mirror it the same way that before we kind of say it out. So instead of 62, you mirror that, it becomes 26. Now we could utilize it both ways. If we connect Richard Hart's birthday to this year, when we had the Chinese New Year on January 22nd, you can see it is 260 days apart. You remove the 0, you have 26. Now, Chinese New Year has 66 double-digit date numerology, so you say that, it becomes 2 6s. Again, your hidden number 26. Then I brought up the date of the 26th of August, again, another 26, and we connect that date to the day that the SEC came after Richard, which was on 7/39, the end of July, and you can see they are 26 days apart. This is all giving even more emphasis to that date that I found of August 26th. I'm not just pulling it out of nowhere. I'm tying it into every little piece of this code. So this is really powerful. We really need to consider this particular date. Now, let's actually analyze the day that the SEC came after Richard on July 23rd. And I brought up this date, believe it or not, a couple weeks ago in my Red Pill podcast. Anyone who's a Patreon supporter, you know I've been talking about this date. So isn't it wild that we get this energy to happen on that particular date? Definitely go back and watch that decode if you haven't. And if you're just joining now, you can check out the last Red Pill podcast that I released. 2 podcasts ago, I actually talked about specifically this number, 31 tied to July. So it was amazing to have that event on the eve of the full moon. So, I mean, I would love to explore this a little bit more for you guys because I think we could really make today's decode very special. I mean, I could go all day on this. He was born in 1979, right? 1979 was the year of the goat. Okay. Now goat in the code gives you 43. We're going to be coming back to that in a moment, but the goat is also associated with the sheep or the ram, like how the Los Angeles Rams won the Super Bowl for the 2021 NFL season. I decoded that before it happened, and I picked the Rams to win because of negative aspects associated with the tiger. We were in the year of the tiger during that Super Bowl game, and this was also in the year of the Shemitah. And why this matters for today's decode is because Hex had an incredible performance in 2021. Coincidentally, the same year the Rams win the Super Bowl for, and Richard Hart is associated with this since he was born in the year of the goat, year of the ram. And for anyone who wants to say, well, everything did good in 2021, well, look at the overall altcoin market and then look at the Hex chart for 2021. I'm going to zoom out here. And if we were to take a look at, let's just say, total 2, this excludes Bitcoin. And you can see right here, this peak that we got was in May 2021, and then we had a huge correction, a little bit of a recovery into this time frame. I mean, if it wasn't for Ethereum, this data would look totally different. I think it would be very fair to actually pull up a chart like VeChain, and this gives you a really good idea. This is April of 2021, and then this is your pullback into July, continuous lower highs and continuation to the downside. You pull up something like Chainlink, another really good example. Peak into April, May, pullback into July, continual lower highs and downtrend. Then you pull up the Hex chart and you see that this is April. And what happened after April? This thing went up parabolically. Okay. So if you go from April to September, you're going to get an almost 4,000% gain. while most of the crypto market had a 50 to 80% correction during that time. Of course, some projects were covering into Q4 2021, but most did not, which makes this EHEX chart incredibly unique in that regard. It doesn't seem to move the way that everything else does necessarily. It does kind of move in its own way. So since this project is directly associated with Saturn through the hexagon symbolism, remember 2021 was the Shemitah year. It started actually in September of 2021. That is the Sabbath year, or the year of Saturn. This project literally moved up in a straight line into the very start of the Shemitah in September 2021 and has since had a 99% correction. So you have to keep this stuff in mind, especially if you have any doubt of this code and how important it is and how this market actually operates. But I'm sure by now, if you've been following along with my channel for some time, your doubts are probably dissolving. This code is just so powerful, and we're here exposing it right here in a public YouTube video. Okay? Final mind-blowing gem I needed to share about this August 26th date. Remember, I was speaking about Saturn and the influence of this Saturnian mythology on this particular project hex and tied to Richard Hart. Well, let's go to the date of Saturnalia, which is the festival that lasts about, a week-long period. I'm going to just pull it up on basic Wikipedia, show you what's going on here if you guys would like to do more research. And you could see it's between the 17th through 23rd. This is very critical to pay attention to, because this entire crypto market, this entire finance sector, no matter if it's stocks, precious metals, the stock market, doesn't matter. It is ruled by Saturn, okay? That's just facts. So we have this Saturnalia festival, and it's funny how around this time of year is when the market is actually typically on its final bullish energy. It's not every single time, but in a majority of the iterations of bull runs, that's what we typically see right there into the end of the year. On the other hand, that's also when we see some of our biggest sell-offs, profit taking into the end of the year, tax loss harvesting, you name it. Like, there's a lot that goes into this, and it has everything to do with what has been covered up by the idea of Christmas. Okay, so that's the exoteric thing. You have Christmas, and then the esoteric would be Saturnalia. It would almost be like the purge. It's pretty interesting, so definitely go do your research if you're unaware. Now, getting back to this, remember before I was telling you about Saturn and the Saturn giving you that 21. Well, I want to go to the date within Saturnalia that is the 21st of December, and want to show you how this is all coded in. This is very fascinating, okay? So, one last thing that I want everyone to remember is this: the SEC came after Ripple on December 22nd of 2020. That was literally during Saturnalia. So this absolutely needs to be considered. Saturn is Father Time, the Grim Reaper. Literally, the SEC is the Grim Reaper. Gary Gensler is the Grim Reaper of the United States crypto industry, and what sadly the SEC does affects the price for everyone who's invested, no matter where you live, because the US rules the fiat system, money created out of thin air, which is what crypto is as well. It's all just belief at the end of the day, and what's happening over the past couple of years proves it without a shadow of a doubt. So now that we're at this date of December 21st, that 21 code associated with Saturn, this 12 code being the mirror of the 21, again associated with Saturn. And this is very interesting because when we tie it to this particular date of August 26th, the date that I've been sharing, we get the 117. Now, this 117 code is tied perfectly to the birthday of Richard Hart on the day he was born, 1979. You can see double-digit date numerology on his birthday, 117. And between Saturnalia, which is associated directly with Hex because of Saturn's hexagon, you get 117 days apart from that August 26th date that I've been sharing in this year. It's coming up very, very soon. 117 days, tied to his birthday date numerology in double digits. I mean, somebody go tell this man to stay in a bunker below the Louis Vuitton store on August 26th. But jokes aside, family, I'm definitely interested in this date with all these connections. Only issue I have is that it lands on a Saturday. And before I exposed it in a way that could be kind of helpful, but because here we're interested in finances and markets, of course, on a Saturday, the traditional markets are closed, right? So those do play a big influence on any extremes in the data that we have in regards to the markets and price action. But perhaps the Friday that comes before it, that could be where it all starts to unfold. Whilst the traditional markets are still open, governments are still operating as usual, etc., etc. After all, Friday, August 25th is 6 days before the blue moon this month on August 31st. Let me just show you that date real quick. This being one of the decodes I released. And if we have the number 6, it's going to come back to hex, because a hexagon is a 6-sided polygon. That's what their logo shows you. It's 3 hexagons within each other. 6, 6, 6. Just like Richard was born on 10/9/1979. And you can see that right there in his standard date numerology of his birthday. He was born on the 36 date numerology. That's 3 6s. That is 3 hexagons. That is the hex logo. This man was made to do this perfectly. You can see it all in the code. So I know this is pretty mind-blowing stuff. I really hope you're taking notes, and I hope that you could start to apply this to your own system. Now, I believe we got everything covered here. Now let's quickly go over to this EHEX chart and review this call that I made back on June 10th. It's actually right here. And you can see this post from June 10th. I was talking about a hex target of 0.003 EHEX, and that was quite a while ago now in crypto conversation. So here we are today, and we're actually seeing it get to that range. Pretty nice bounce on the day so far, though. But we did wick down to 0.038, effectively approaching my lower range lows to be considered for the finality of this ongoing correction that's been approaching 2 years of a downtrend with continuous lower lows in the structure. Now, the issue with this is that if EHEX starts to close weekly candles below 0.003, and I actually want to pull up this chart to show you, if we were to close weekly candles below this area right here of 0.003 cents, unfortunately, this could be where it gets ugly. So I do have an issue with this. If this was to happen, we're talking about weekly closures below a critical macro support, and that being broken, unfortunately, could lead to a slide down, even shaving off another 0 in the process. Then it's literally thin air below 0.026, 0.025, and 0.006. That's 3 zeros and a 6. Now, I know that this makes some people cringe, but this 0.003 cent level is hopeful as a prior 200-day support right here. So that's me being a little bit hopeful that if we were to continue a little bit lower down into the, full pullback, that would be a critical level of support, because if you were to measure about how long it stayed sideways here in this consolidation range, is about 200 days. The overall time frame approaching almost a full year before it actually started to fulfill its breakout. So that still doesn't disregard that creating lows coming in around that 0.026 level. Anything below those levels is a Greek tragedy. If the Hex community doesn't step in, this thing will continue to free fall, as those who are invested continually seem to be de-risking at this time. Mostly, I'm going to go ahead and just say it's most likely due to the loss of faith in this project. And those aren't my words exactly. That's what my own private clients I've had exposed to me. I've had at least 100 people directly tell me that everything they believed back in 2020, 2021, and all the hopium for them regarding Hex is starting to dissolve, or it's completely dissolved and they've completely lost faith in it because of some recent developments. And honestly, even if I didn't know that, I could quickly look at these charts and I could see that sentiment in the price action. My community who follows along my weekly Red Pill podcasts knows that I'm very quickly able to identify the vibe of what's going on in a coin or Forex or whatever, the company associated with the project or the community of supporters behind the project, just by looking at the charts. And this chart looks like it's currently in its own Great Depression. It needs something positive and hopeful to reverse this negative sentiment, but to be honest, in my opinion, it's going to take a lot of convincing in order for that to happen. Even with the launch of PulseChain, this is still in a freefall. Even with all the preaching over the past year or 2 years that the SEC could do nothing to Hex, well, here we are breaking through support and dropping an additional 50% from the short-term hype of Richard Hart and his documentary news dropping. And the community who is invested in this thing just continues to de-risk, obviously. And that can't be disregarded. See, when something is actually bullish, by default, any bearish news can barely affect its price. It'll be minimal because the investors actually believe in what they hold and they're not going to de-risk. And when something is actually intrinsically bearish, the slightest bit of bearish news is like a guillotine. This Hex chart looks like it's being tortured in one of those Saw movies. But seriously though, all jokes aside, this movement on E-Hex will absolutely translate over to P-Hex. And for those who don't know, that is the essentially Hex on the PulseChain, which this also broke through a key support zone and is continuing onto lower lows in the structure as well. Once it broke below a penny, and I'm talking about P-Hex right now, I do believe perhaps I have the chart. Yeah, here we are. So once this thing started to break below a penny, it confirmed a continuation of a downtrend after this rejection right here at about 0.25 cents back on July 14th. Again, this move up was coordinated with the news of the launch of the Richard Hart documentary. So overall, these charts are very, very weak. And with limited chart data on P-Hex, this could get ugly if we see E-Hex break down to that lower range I shared earlier. If that comes to fruition, then P-Hex could be in further price discovery, but to the downside. I know this all sounds very doom and gloom, but I'm just being a real one with y'all. This is not looking so good, and I've been very vocal about Q4 this particular year with the end of the Jubilee on September 17th and this upcoming solar eclipse on October 14th, coincidentally right around Richard Hart's 44th birthday. I'm anticipating an event that could be shocking for the global financial system. And of course, this event I see affecting crypto and blockchain as a whole. This is why I'm coming out with my next big decode titled Yellow Bricks Road, which will cover the upcoming 15th annual BRICS Summit in South Africa on August 22nd and 24th. I'll be releasing that decode in advance and sharing more of my thoughts of what I'm anticipating for Q4 this year, especially since the next Federal Reserve FOMC meeting is September 19th and Powell speaking on September 20th within 2 weeks from the start of Q4. So another perk for my Patreon supporters is that you'll have access to that decode when it's released in a couple weeks. And you can start now by catching yourself up on the last presentation I released titled August Blue Moon Decoded, dedicated to this month we're in now. And of course, on the eve of this first supermoon of the month, the SEC goes after Richard Hart and Hex, kicking off this blue moon season with a bang. And I think they'll be ritualizing this blue moon on August 31st with an even bigger bang. Not necessarily just to Hex, but perhaps the whole financial system. And I exposed all of that in the last decode I released, which is on Patreon now. And I'll be following that up very soon in a couple weeks with that BRICS decode. So going back to that time where we saw this moment in December 2020 for XRP, I'm just going to quickly pull up that chart and we remember how this all went down. It was right here on this big correction, breaking through a pretty important support level, but it didn't last there for too long. When the news officially hit, within just a couple weeks, we actually saw quite an incredible breakout back to the prior levels, and then a little bit of a backup phase, which led to the yearly buying climax. And right here, this moment seemed orchestrated, but it still just brought us back to a technical support level. Well, we could look at the hex chart and we could kind of see that this is a long-term critical support level right there. So this is the area that needed to be retested regardless if we had the SEC come after Richard Hart or not. And that was why I shared that 003 cent target in advance. And I told everyone, I don't care what's the reason that causes it. At the end of the day, this is most likely an area that's going to be filled out to complete the overall downside energy. Now, I've shared all my thoughts on everything before. With that, we just looked at the XRP chart and see that this was the moment that the SEC came after Ripple, and it was pretty hopeful after that. I mean, even breaking out into higher highs in the structure overall. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be at play for Hex, but this is not my way of giving you hopium. It's just for me to say that when the news initially comes in, that's not always the worst day. Like, it could take some time. If we were to look at this, we have on the 22nd was the day the lawsuit effectively came into play. And then right there, it had an additional about 60% drop. I don't know if we're there quite yet with Hex. I want to just quickly see if we do have a similarity in this day-to-day drop. So we have the 31st. Oof, yeah, this could get bad. I'm going to go from the 31st, and I'm just going to take 50 off and see where that... Okay, so 50 off puts us effectively right there at 003 on the nose. If we were to mimic that, it would be... Yeah, that's rough. Okay, so this is just the start of what could be the bottoming out energy. We'll see how this candle closes today, but this does look like a pretty nice buyback so far on some 4-hourly candles. If I was to get really micro with this, I would say look out for this level right here between 0057 and 007. I don't know if it can make it back up to that, but that's a prior support level. We do not want to confirm that as a resistance. So it could look something like this. If it really wants to fake people out, come up to the prior support, which held for, let me see, lasted about 50 days. And then that structure breaking down needs to be retested. So just keep that in mind. It could look something like this, coming back up and then shooting down one more time. This would be a really harsh rejection, but it's how coins like to move. I talked about it back here when I discussed that there could be a move back up to 0013 for Hex before the continuation of the downside. That was a call out that I gave that came to life as well. And I shared that because I didn't want the Hex community getting too optimistic initially about this sell-off, thinking that this was it. You know, I was very adamant that I don't think this is it. I think we have more room to go to the downside. So here we are. We've been very calm about this the whole time. I mean, I hope that you guys have received some value from this way of analyzing things without it being too complicated. I've done my best to try to simplify it for you. I'm going to quickly wrap up this video with what I see with Bitcoin, and then we're going to keep it moving. So right here, we have this Bitcoin chart. We've been holding on a similar pattern since the start of this year, literally since the start of 2023. You can see it has a 200 or so day really powerful trendline support. We keep entering these mini cycles where we have somewhat of a downtrend kind of bull flag, which leads us into our next move up, and it's perfectly at this intersection between this major support trend line and wherever this short-term micro support downtrend leads to. So you can see it happening on this pivot, and this pivot. And typically that tends to be the point where I guess the market maker feels the sentiment is bearish enough. It's fearful. It's not as excited. It's boring. And that's a good time to send it in the other direction. And notice how we always have a low candle. We always have lows before it just springs to the opposite. So we are coming pretty close to this next pivot. I believe that it's probably days away when we should see Bitcoin take its next leg up. We do have the new moon coming up in about 2 weeks or so. That tends to be the moment that we move into bullishly. And right now we're just pivoting out of what seems to be the full moon energy, even though it's happening today and yesterday. Technically, we did get the micro cycle low thus far on the full moon. So that's pretty nice. And I shared that the third quarter moon could be something to consider as a pivot point. of absolutely the last moment of it should be in this more bearish trend. So between now and the 8th, we should be in our process of moving out of this 29, 30K zone and then back into the 31, perhaps breaking into 32 by the middle of this month. And we still have that CME gap that needs to be fulfilled. I do see that being filled before this rolls over, and that's putting you at about 35.2. I've been bringing it up in a lot of my videos. I'm not like a religious gap believer, but I do see that the majority of the time they get filled. And with this setup here of filling the top, we're pretty much right there. I mean, we're a kiss away for Bitcoin, only a 19% move to the upside. And then coming back in to potentially fill this downside gap here at 2021 would be a textbook play. And this would be a long-term structure being built, which would be the finality of a bear market structure. So that would be a very clean way to do it. Of course, we're in crypto, so expect volatility along the way. But I'm going to leave it here on today's video. I really wanted to get into the philosophy as well as more of the esoteric side of things for this newer community that's been following my work, and to show you that the Wolfpack, this community that is here, we're open to collaborating. We're not trying to spit on anyone in the process. We don't look at you guys as losing or winning. We're all here to help each other grow and expand consciously. That's really what we're about. And I know that there are enlightened beings that are in any of these crypto communities, and that's really who gravitate to us. So I appreciate all the support. Definitely make sure to check out the last decode I released over on Patreon if you're becoming a supporter today. It really means the world to me. And I'm wishing you a beautiful rest of your day. Much love.